Welcome to Simon Paschal Says. I'm Paul Simon, joined here with Dustin Paschal. Today we're going to talk about kind of holiday guides and kind of do's and don'ts for employers. So I've got 5 questions for you here, Dustin, and so we'll get started. First question for you is, what legal considerations should small businesses keep in mind when decorating for the holidays?
Yeah, I think with that one, it's kind of an inflex kind of question. I mean, at the end of the day, there's nothing in the law that says employers cannot have religious-based holiday decorations. You certainly can as an employer. That doesn't violate the law, and it doesn't violate the law to do decorations related to one religion over the other. The thing you have to concern yourself with as an employer is, are you giving the impression that you favor one religion over the other, such that later, when things arise and issues arise regarding maybe a religious complaint, are you creating the impression of a bias toward a religion that's going to kind of bite you in the end? The other piece that you may have to think about is, if you do decorate with just perhaps religious-based holiday decorations and it's just one religion in particular, if someone comes to you from a different religion and says, hey, I'd like to put mine up, you certainly are within your rights to say no as an employer. That's not legally wrong in and of itself, but again, you're creating the impression of some sort of bias in favor of one religion and against another, which all those little pieces of bias can be put together to be used against you, which is why generally they say best practice, avoid religious-based decorations in the workplace in general, because then you can't get into any trouble.
Perfect. So the question's going to be what's religious-based decorations,
Sure.
But that's another time. So, all right, question 2 for you, Dustin. How can businesses give gifts without legal complications?
Yeah, I mean, the thing to remember, we're really at the end of the day kind of talking about employee gifts in my mind, because that's the ones that employers really have to worry about. And at the end of the day, what it is those are taxable. You know, you tax your employees' wages. You don't think about when you're giving them gifts, that's taxable. What the law says, though, is if it's a de minimis gift, then you don't have to tax the employee. The problem is if it's any gift that is cash or easily calculable as cash, no matter how big or small, is taxable. So if you give a $5 gift card, you got employment taxes on that $5 gift card because that's easily calculated. But if you give a gift basket, if it's a small gift basket, you're likely not going to have to pay any taxes on that. But if you give an employee a TV, now all of a sudden we're going to have to pay employment taxes on the TV you gave that employee.
Yeah, and I'd say the only other thing I would add would just be, it's probably a good time, depending on the nature, what industry your business is in, is if you have employees who have some sort of role where they're not allowed to accept gifts that could be considered some sort of bribe or something like that, to remind them of that, because again, the gift that they may be receiving from a client or customer, that may not be the intent, but it could be some sort of violation. So something just to remind your employees that they may not be able to accept gifts if they're given to them. All right, so question 3, what are the legalities surrounding holiday bonuses and incentives for employees?
I mean, really, it's kind of the same thing. That probably ties into the last one. I mean, bonuses, incentives, all those are still going to have to be taxed. And at the end of the day, the other thing to keep in mind is, if you've got a non-exempt employee, that's probably going to be thrown into their regular wage for purposes of overtime, unless the bonus is truly discretionary. But there's a misnomer about discretionary. If you give Christmas bonuses every year, you may think, well, that's discretionary, I don't have to. But if you do it every year and it's kind of set, oh, it's always a Christmas bonus, well, then the question really arises, is it truly discretionary? What they mean by discretionary is like truly kind of the blue, I give you a bonus. That's not going to be put in the regular rate, but other bonuses and incentives might affect the regular rate for your non-exempt employees.
Perfect. So our 4th question, everyone's favorite, holiday Christmas parties. So any legal advice for companies hosting a holiday party where there's alcohol in the workplace?
Sure. I mean, there's a host of risks. There's nothing in the law that says you cannot serve alcohol as an employer at a party. You certainly can. You just have to keep in mind the risks involved, and there's a host of risks. I mean, one, if people get inebriated and then there start to be sexual harassment complaints or physical violence of some sort, that's going to get you in trouble. If there's someone gets drunk and they fall in your office or something along those lines, now you've got a workers' comp issue, and if you're not a subscriber, now is there some negligence involved? Driving home, again, if you're kind of serving the alcohol yourself and you let an employee drive home, the question becomes, how liable are you for that as an employer? And it's going to depend on, did you have TABC servers serving? They're going to really assume a lot of the liability with cutting someone off, but there is some case law out there, oddly enough, that says when an employer steps in and says, hey, you might be inebriated, you probably shouldn't drive, and then the employee drives anyway, the law says the employer has now kind of taken on that liability. So your safest bet, get everybody Ubers, use TABC certified bartenders, or do the party at a location that provides their own TABC bartenders and insurance and all that kind of stuff.
All right, and our final question here, how can businesses navigate time off policies during the holiday season?
Yeah, again, that's really going to, what's going to come into play there is, again, discrimination, primarily related on religion, because different religious observances have different holidays. So you got to make sure if you're giving people time off for Christmas, if you've got an employee that comes to you and wants time off for Hanukkah, then you need to give it to them. Otherwise, you're treating employees differently with respect to the privileges of employment, and discrimination exists if you're treating employees differently based on a protected category for the terms, conditions, and privileges of employment. Time off would be a privilege of employment. So religious issues are going to really come up a lot there, but also gender-based issues can come into play. We've got parents who are having to deal with their kids being off at school. They may be asking for time off. If you're treating fathers who are asking for time off different than mothers asking for time off, maybe we've got some gender issues at play. So the real key there is always consistency, treat everyone the same, have a policy, follow your policy.
Perfect. So that's your 5 Q&As for you guys to think of as we head into these holiday seasons. We thank you for joining us at Simon Paschal Says, and tune in next time.